Hey guys, welcome back to another Jewish Crash Out. I'm Jack the Jew, and on this one we're going to be covering another Piers Morgan debate, extravaganza, circus, yada yada. It doesn't get that crazy on this one. It's actually a pretty good debate between two people that I actually kind of respect. I very much respect. His
So,
name is Victor David Hanson. And the guy here, this is Victor David Hanson, Davis Hanson, and this is Professor Roy Casagranda, and they're talking about Iran. Just to give a little bit of a background, um, let's look at him. So, I've I've watched this guy in the past. He has an affinity for Arab culture and history. Oh, he serves as an expert at United Arab Emirates University. Now, I'm friends with the UAE, Israel is. But again, he does have a favoritism, let's say, or a bias of favoritism for the Islamic Golden Age and, talking about that. But he has a certain perspective. And then I wanted to know he's been a keynote speaker at Qatar Foundation annual teachings, blah, blah, blah. He's talked openly about how Qatar is good and stuff like that. I don't know if that's a full connection. And he's actually, he calls balls and strikes and says that the Russian propaganda narratives of denazification, why Putin justified going into Ukraine, were wrong. So you'll see that he does go against. He's a little bit anti-Israel, or has a definite negative bias against Israel. And Victor Davis Hanson, he's been I've seen him before. He's an American military historian. He's in the Hoover Institution, um, California State University, I guess, military history. Yeah, he's been doing a lot of stuff, and I've seen him a while. They're both very good. I would say Victor Davis Hanson is more on the pro-Israel side, or at least understanding where Israel's role is in the Middle East, or that we're not the. You'll see again. So let's just get into it, and yeah, great. Let's get into it.
Iran has obviously been a pariah in the region for a long time, but nobody's a bigger pariah than Israel. Israel is currently bombing Lebanon. Israel is still genociding Gaza. And so the possibility of us returning.
So you can see his bias. That's his bias. And first of all, we're by far not the worst. And I think I'm not 100% sure. I think this is a picture of Nasser. It looks like Nasser of Egypt, and maybe that's Sadat. I don't know. Anyways, so yeah, so you can see his definite big, huge bias. There is no genocide. It is an entire blood libel. I personally take full offense to him actually calling what happened in Gaza genocide, especially with his intellect.
Turning back to the Abraham Accords are completely off the table. I think, maybe one or two Arab states would consider it, but the reality is that Israel has made itself into a bigger pariah than Iran. It's openly talking about creating an empire in the region. It's carved off a chunk of.
He's believing all these conspiracies. I'm actually very surprised by him actually believing all these conspiracies that we're trying to expand and yada yada. Again, there are 15 million Jews. There are 9 million, let's say 9 million Jews in Israel. We're not expanding anywhere.
Syria, in addition to the Golan Heights. And so the idea that somehow the GCC will go running to Israel, Israel's the reason they're getting bombed. I mean, one of the reasons why the United
Wow.
States put bases in the GCC was so that it could set up early warning systems for Israel so that if
Not to protect oil supplies to America in the 1980s and the 70s. That wasn't the reason.
Iran launched missiles, those missiles would be detected early. So that's one of the first things Iran did was blow up the U.S. military bases, which, by the way, are in ruins. And for the record,
another narrative that is false. They're not in ruins. There has been destruction thanks to the Chinese giving, coordinates to the Iranians. But again, he's pushing out narratives that are distinctly part of the anti-Western, anti-Israel side.
The United States has done exactly zero to stop the missile strikes on the GCC.
That's entirely false. They've entirely put in air defenses. One of the reasons why I think Trump didn't go in January 13th or at the New Year time was because the GCC was not protected. And during that time, up to February 28th, they put in THAAD and Patriot missiles and all types of anti-ballistic and yada, 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 and planes to shoot down drones and etc. So, sorry, no, they've done a lot. The U.S. has done a lot for the GCC. They haven't lifted a finger for themselves.
So even though France and Great Britain have actually been helping the GCC push back against the drone and missile strikes, the United States did nothing. It
did nothing? Again,
completely abandoned its allies. It even abandoned its expats. In the opening days of the war, the expats who wanted to leave were like, what do we do? And the federal government's response was, you're on your own, good luck. And then when they...
And that's the same thing that happened in Israel. If you had booked a flight that you were going to leave and go on vacation, you couldn't leave because the Ben Gurion airport was shut down. What do you think happened in the UAE, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia? It was difficult to travel.
They finally did evacuate people. They charged them money for it, which was hilarious to me because it was like, wait a minute, I thought you were supposed to take care of your citizens. You didn't have a plan in place in the event you triggered a war that caused Iran to retaliate. Iran said it was going to do exactly what it did before this happened. On my podcast, I even said what was going to happen. I did the podcast on Monday, but we released it on Thursday. And then on Saturday, it happened because Iran had told us they were going to bomb the GCC, they were going to bomb Israel, and they were going to close the Strait of Hormuz. And that's exactly what they did. And so,
amazing. It was a stupid move. That's the reason why we didn't believe they were going to do it, because it is a stupid strategy.
So the fact that the Trump administration didn't have a plan for the bombing of the GCC and didn't have a plan for closing the Strait shows they didn't think this through. They just blundered into this. And it's bizarre because they had months to think about this.
And you call yourself an historian.
They can close this. They can close the straits tomorrow if they want, because there's no Navy other than about 100 PT boats. There's 800 Apaches and Warthogs in the skies that are capable at any time. It's a political decision. And why is it a political decision not to restart the war? Because we have this schizophrenia in the United States that on Monday, if Donald Trump says, I want to negotiate with the Iranians, they call him a taco. He's sold out. If on Tuesday he says, I have to force them to negotiate, so I'm going to have to be kinetic, then he's Hitler. And he's under pressure from the Republicans in the midterms, and he is halted right now. But make no mistake about it.
You're blaming his flip-flopping and his constant changing his story.
No, I'm not. I'm not. I think
he'll contradict himself 3 times. No, you're blaming.
In war, you have to be dynamic. You cannot be unflexible in a war. So the strategy has changed. We were bombing them. Now there's a blockade, and now there's economic pressure, and et cetera, and et cetera. So it's a different strategy, but you have to be flexible in war.
I'm not. I'm saying that he is reacting to political pressure, but it's not a military problem. They don't have the military capability to shut down the Strait of Hormuz if we say that they cannot. We have them. We can destroy. We did because we are restrained right now. They can destroy every piece.
We're restrained by the American people not wanting to go in. If all of a sudden he starts bombing again, or if they have to do a military action in the Straits of Hormuz, which might happen, the American people are not for it. So there you go.
It's politically restrained.
The United States attacked Iran, a country that had no means to attack the United States, was not threatening to attack the United States. We still don't know why.
3 soldiers were killed in Jordan by a Iranian-backed Iraqi militia. So yes, they've been attacking Americans for a long time. Not specifically the territory of America, but I consider a base in Jordan controlled by the Americans American territory. Sorry.
Yeah, what was Iran going to do?
It told the world. It told the world it had not enriched to 60%. It told the world that it had only had 17 to 1,800 ranges on their missile. Everything that regime has ever said has been false. Everything it said.
Which can
They
be
tried
said
to
about the Trump
assassinate.
administration.
They tried. They tried to
I don't
assassinate
understand.
the.
So now the historian, the great historian, he's trying to do whataboutism.
They've tried to assassinate the Saudi ambassador. They have had people are arrested in the United States for plotting to kill the president of the United States. They funded all of these Arab groups that have committed 50 years of terrorism. Everybody knows that. It was just a question of, is anybody going to call them to account? And you can argue whether he did, but there's no argument about the military ability to call him account. When Bill Clinton went in to Serbia in 72 days, they said at day 50, he's not going to be able to do it. He's not going to be able to do it because to do it, you have to hit the grid and you have to hit the bridges on the Danube and isolate them. And he said that would be a dual-use target. I won't do it. And then he did it in spades, and the war was over in 72 days. The same thing with Libya. That was a misadventure, but Barack Obama never got congressional authorization, nor did Clinton. He bombed for 7 months. And finally he said, we're going to hit dual-use targets. He hit the docks, he hit cargo ships, he hit communications. We haven't done that. We haven't done that at all. You say that we've committed war crimes. If you think that what we've done is a war crime, then you should think that Barack Obama and Bill Clinton should be tried at the International Criminal Court compared to
He does.
the damage they did.
How do we
And-
get that to happen? I'm ready.
Well,
I mean,
go
look at
ahead.
Libya today. It's a complete disaster. So that was a dumb intervention.
I oppose that. I
So we should bring Obama and Bill Clinton to the ICJ and bring them up for war crimes. Okay, let's give that a shot. Let's see how that works out.
was in Libya I had a ruptured appendix and
But you
moved in
didn't,
Libya.
you
I
didn't
know all
oppose
about Libya.
Iraq. And Iraq was a complete disaster.
Iraq was a misadventure in the sense that we decided to create a democracy when we should have just removed the regime and allowed a caretaker government to take it. But the idea of nation building in that part of the world was a mistake.
But Victor, on this notion of regime change, you know, the history shows us that it's hardly ever been a successful strategy to try and affect regime change in the Middle East. And Trump himself seemed very aware of that and was like, you know, I'm not going to do this. We're not going to get into, you know, endless wars in the Middle East, very expensive on human life, on the economy and so on. He was very adamant about this, and people voted for him because of that. He said, I'm going to be America first, looking after our interests, strong border, strong economy, good.
He also said several times that Iran will never have a nuclear weapon, and they keep trying to have a nuclear weapon.
Cost of living, bring inflation down. Every part of this Iran war so far has flown in the face of everything he campaigned on, hasn't it? I mean, he's gone and chosen the biggest possible Middle Eastern war he could have possibly got involved with. It's been in the short. Well, let me finish my question. In the short term, it's been economically disastrous. I mean, it's pretty much double price of gas at the pump. It's going to inevitably lead to raging inflation on food prices the longer it goes on because of the issue of fertilizer not coming through the Strait of Hormuz. And politically, like you say, it's obviously very toxic politically to the extent that he can't even militarily reopen the Strait because politically he can't do it. So I'm really struggling to see a coherent strategy here that is consistent with what Trump promised to do when he was campaigning to be re-elected.
Well, he said he was not going to have a war. I think it was an optional ground war in the Middle East. He's done this before, Piers. He killed Soleimani, he killed Baghdadi. He had a sustained bombing campaign that eliminated ICE. He was in Syria. The Wagner group attacked
ISIS.
him. He had a full-fledged war. He killed more Russians in the first term than during the entire Cold War. He removed the Maduro government. So he had done that. And the red line for him apparently was you don't get in a protracted ground war anywhere, especially in the Middle East. We haven't done that yet. And we haven't been there as long as we were in Serbia.
But if his goal, Victor, as he now says, he's now sort of centered it down to one goal, to stop Iran developing a nuclear weapon. Do you concede that if at the end of these negotiations, which we're told are happening and may lead to some kind of deal, if that does not involve Iran handing over its enriched uranium, then the goal has not been achieved and the war will have failed, won't it?
If they do not hand over the nuclear, or it's not cemented, or it's not on, we don't know where it is. A lot of people have argued you couldn't get it anyway. But if whatever the international adjudicators can tell us where it is and whether it's recoverable. If it is recoverable, and we didn't get it, then yes, that was a failure. But the regime, we keep talking about they can do this and they can do that militarily. What can they do militarily? They have no military. And that took them a half century to create it.
But they don't have to. But they don't have to, do they? Because they can just continue to use the Strait of Hormuz as their most effective weapon, and they can continue. They've still got apparently many hundreds, if not thousands, of ballistic missiles left, so they can still lob a load of those at their neighbouring Gulf states.
We don't know how many they have.
Right, but it's believed they've still got up to 1,000. I think I read. And look, we don't know for sure. Obviously, I don't know, that's the caveat.
Well, key. The key thing is if he's going to negotiate and not destroy the ability for them to make, close the strait. That is, eliminate all the PT boats and get rid of and eliminate the missiles. I myself thought when they targeted the UAE and they saw it, we could have replied. We didn't have to go into full-fledged war, but we could have replied in a way that would have made given us some deterrence. Yes, that will be a mistake if he negotiates that. But it will not. It will. But you have to concede, Piers, that when this war's over and people look and go in there and they look at the military and what it was, it's been a devastating loss and it's been very asymmetrical. I mean,
listen. Like I said to you, I think there's no doubt at all that the U.S. and Israeli military have inflicted massive damage on Iran's conventional military capability.
I agree. It will be incomplete if they can't certify that the uranium is unusable for a nuclear weapon. You asked me earlier very quickly about the global ripples, but everybody says that there's these winners. China has no ability to buy sanctioned oil at a discount from Iran now. 4 million. It was buying 4 million barrels of sanctioned oil from Venezuela, Iran, and other places. It can't do that now. And I don't think after looking at the U.S. Navy and Air Force, it's going to be ready to go into Taiwan, especially given what we see about drone warfare in Ukraine. Russia's lost 2 million people in Ukraine, dead and wounded. And it has no client anymore for the first time in 50 years in the Middle East. It's lost its Syrian client. It's lost any influence with Iran now. It's completely neutered in that respect. There's going to be a reappraisal of NATO, and I think it'll be a wake-up call that NATO powers, if they don't want to use their airspace for the Americans to do something that is in the general interest of them and the United States, that's fine. And I don't think we should get out of NATO, but there will be a realistic appraisal where certain coalitions of the willing will be dominant, and that will be probably Eastern European NATO members. And I will say that if Britain were to ask the United States for all the help, we went on a unilateral expedition to the Falklands again, something like that, or the French to Chad, or the French and British to say, can you join the coalition of the willing in Serbia, or our coalition of the willing that we planned for Libya, they're going to say no.
Okay, Professor.
That's a difference.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there's been a big shift in sentiment there. Professor Casagranda, what's your response to Victor there, particularly about as we go forward, the changing geopolitics of all this?
Okay, so let me start with the uranium. We knew where the uranium was 10 months ago, and we knew where the uranium was since the JCPOA. When we bombed Iran 10 months ago and completely obliterated and totally destroyed their stockpiles, which of course we knew was nonsense at the time.
They didn't have 60% uranium during the JCPOA.
They hid it. They squirreled it away somewhere, and deep inside some mountain, probably. We don't know its condition now. So in other words, what Trump has done by tearing up the JCPOA and then by bombing 10 months ago is he's made it so we don't know where the uranium is. And so the irony is this current war, if his goal is to get to the uranium, there's no reason for the Iranians to hand it over. Again, he's made the situation a disaster, and now he's trying to figure out how to dig himself out of it. As far as NATO goes, Trump has made it absolutely clear, first in his first term when he refused to acknowledge Article 5 of the NATO treaty, no matter how many times NATO members asked him, if something happens to one of our members, will Article 5 go into effect for the United States? He refused. He didn't know what it was, or he really just hates NATO's guts. But then the whole Greenland thing, I mean, you know you're in trouble when Mertz, who's basically Trump's lapdog, is saying, I think Trump may have just killed NATO. So it's true, there will be a complete realignment inside NATO because what's happened.
Europe killed NATO.
Happened is France and Germany have woken up and have realized that the United States is no longer a player. That the United
States not a player. They are a player, but they're not going to come and help France and Germany forever after World War II.
States is no longer a partner. That the United States has gone rogue and is doing unjustified wars in the Middle East. And it's no longer playing ball with them, right? Because look, the Iraq War the 2003 war was a complete foolish disaster. There was no reason on earth to do it to begin with, and we brought in Poland and Great Britain. We had all the coalition of the willing countries that we browbeat, like Tonga, into sending help. Japan, we forced Japan to break their own constitution and send help. Well, one of the things that Europe was willing to do was turn a blind eye to this foolishness. Gerhard Schroeder said, please don't do this. We did this in 1939. You're the United States. You have a higher standard than the rest of the world. And, Bush refused to talk to Gerhard Schroeder until the end of his term. And the result was Europe went, we're okay with this. We're going to let them genocide Arabs because, well, they're brown anyway. Who cares? And they're Muslim.
Unbelievable. Now the genocide word just gets thrown out there. And the Iraq war was a genocide. Welcome, America. Welcome to what Israel deals with.
And we hate Muslims because the United States is going to back us no matter what happens if we get in trouble in Europe. And now they know the United States is actually part of the problem and that the United States isn't probably going to be there in case they get in trouble. And so, how could it be a shock that Great Britain and France and Germany didn't want to back the United States in this maniacal war in Iraq?
Right. It has nothing to do with their large Islamic populations in Germany and France. It has nothing to do with that.
Donald Trump told the Germans the worst thing you can do,
and the leftists in both those countries,
was the Nord Stream pipeline. Why are you buying gas from Vladimir Putin and then asking us to defend you when you're profiting him? They said when he came into office, the Biden administration had stopped offensive weapons sales to Ukraine. The Obama administration. The irony is that he approved weapons sales, offensive weapons sales, in a way that Biden or Obama did not do. He told them not to buy gas. He sanctioned the oligarchs. He got out of an asymmetrical missile deal. In fact, when he came in, people had said, you better be very careful. He's alienating the Russians. Despite the whole thing about Russian collusion. And Russia invaded Ukraine during 4 administrations. It's 2 administrations, and they invaded Ossetia, Georgia during the Bush administration. So for 4 administrations, they left their borders and attacked a quasi-European country. And they did not do it during the 4 years of Donald Trump, and they haven't done it now, again, a new invasion. There had to be a reason for that. And the reason was they felt that he had been unpredictable, you can use the term, whatever term you use, but they couldn't count on him not doing anything, like Joe Biden saying, my reaction will depend on whether it's a minor or major invasion. Or going over to Putin and say, if you're going to hack U.S. institutions, please lay off humanitarian institutions. So We have given
I think
Ukraine about $150 billion. And he did it over the loud objections of his MAGA base. And the Biden administration did it. He continued. He's still helping them stealthily, still helping them. And what he doesn't want to do is to give Ukraine a blank check. And I think if this was a different type of situation, the only way Ukraine really could recover all of its territory would to hit offensively to hit targets in Russia. But Russia has 6,500 nuclear weapons, and we don't know.
And this is why Europe needs to put their big boy pants on and actually do something and go against Russia, and not just expect America to be there every time.
What the reaction would be. So we've had restraints on them for that. So are the Europeans. And as far as the Europeans, they can say all they want, but they have just barely met the 2% GDP investment. And that only happened because Donald Trump harangued them. He was obnoxious.
That is true.
He did everything.
That is true.
And they're not going to get to 5%. Our neighbor Canada spends 1.7%. It won't even build an
Pathetic.
icebreaker. And they're completely under the nuclear shield. United States, they can say all they want, but when you talk about the French and the British, Israel has twice the combat aircraft of any one of those three countries, Germany,
Yep.
France, or Britain. We have in the Gulf right now about 2,000 aircraft, 800,
But
as
Israel
I said.
has that material because France, Great Britain, the United States, and Germany provide them with that material. They wouldn't
Yeah, we pay for them.
have that material if they were on their own. And so at the
Yeah, because we're a Western aligned country.
They
end of the
provide
day,
it. They provide it
this is-
because, unlike the country you're speaking from, they're the only consensual society that have regular, open, transparent elections and free speech
they're an
and full rights for
apartheid
women.
state.
No,
Where
they're not.
Arabs are
Have you
subhuman
been-
that they murder on a regular basis.
On a regular basis.
How many
I will tell you-
Gazans have they just slaughtered? And they're
I will
taking
tell you
land
right
away
now-
from
I can tell you
Arabs in
right
the West
now,
Bank
I-
by the minute as we're speaking.
Are you gonna
And they're-
sit
By the minute, unbelievable. Always to the extreme. Whenever pro-Palestinians want to go against Israel, they go to the extremes. Yeah, we're killing people every minute in the West Bank.
Here and tell
bombing
me that.
Lebanon?
Are you going to tell me right now?
Because Lebanon, Hezbollah in Lebanon, was bombing Israel.
That
Talking about-
if a person says in Israel, I don't want to be an observant Jew, I want to be a Muslim and I want to have a mosque and I want to be a Christian and have a church, can you go to the UAE or any of the Gulf states and say, I don't want to be a Muslim, I want to be a Christian, or I want to be a Jew and I want to open a church or a synagogue? No, you
What
can't
does
do
that
that.
have to do with genocide?
Because what he's saying is that where you're living, which I think is maybe the UAE, you can't do that, which is an apartheid state, everybody. If you can't convert to whatever and have freedom of religion, that would be considered apartheid. You cannot be this, you can only be that.
It has to do with why.
Fighting the inability to convert from Islam to another religion with it's okay to slaughter Arabs and who, by
We're not slaughtering Arabs.
the way, a
Piers,
percentage
I'm not
of them
gonna
are
argue.
So many blood libels.
I'm not going to argue that
what-
Israel is
you're
the
not
only
gonna argue-
transparent. It's the only transparent
nonsensical.
consensual. I'm not going to get in an argument because anybody who's empirical knows that Israel is transparent. It has scheduled elections. It has free speech. It has full rights for women, and you have.
It doesn't
a
have
big
free speech.
The
That's
point I was going to
nonsensical.
ask you, Victor, is
Very much Israel has free speech. If we didn't have free speech, Haaretz wouldn't exist. B'Tselem wouldn't exist.
out of interest, 'cause I've had this debate quite a lot recently. Why is it that Israel is not compelled to be transparent about its nuclear capacity in terms of having nuclear weapons?
God, Pierce really has an infatuation with the Israeli nukes.
It is. It has 170 nuclear weapons.
It's never
common
admitted
knowledge.
any.
It doesn't. It maybe never officially, but everybody knows it's allowed people. It discussed.
Again, the reason why we probably, in my opinion, don't officially say anything either way is because if Israel officially said it and we had IEA inspections and everything else and yada, 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 Egypt would want to bomb. Saudi Arabia would want to bomb. Syria would start trying to, Iraq, all of them would try to have a bomb because Israel has a bomb. That's why we don't say jack about it.
Is that all the time. It has 175 nuclear weapons.
But why has it never admitted any of that?
Why is it never admitted? Because I
Dude,
think
get over
most
it.
countries don't admit how many they have. We don't admit exactly how many ready nuclear weapons we have. When I say there's 6,500 Russian nuclear weapons, that's because of intelligence estimates. But the Israelis have never denied it. If you say somebody to even the Netanyahu government, you have 175 nuclear weapons, he'll say no comment. And I think Donald Trump would say no comment. But we know how many we have. It's the official position of all these countries not to talk about how many nuclear weapons.
Yeah, but I think my point is
Britain,
Israel don't admit to having any. They don't admit to having any nuclear weapons at all. And I'm not sure why they are allowed to have the only pass on that kind of transparency about whether a country has nuclear weapons. We know 9 countries do. That list doesn't include Israel. And I'm just bemused as to why.
Do what?
Well, officially 9 countries in the world have nuclear weapons. That list does not include officially Israel. And I've never understood why, if they have 170, as you say, why are they not part of that list? Why are they not country number 10 and transparent?
Because country number 11 and 12 would be Egypt and Saudi Arabia, and Iran would go, well, they have it, we need to have it. That's what their excuse even nowadays is. And that's the reason why we don't officially say it.
About it. You say how transparent they are. Why are they not transparent about their nuclear capacity?
Israel has 11 million people, and it's in a sea of 500 people, 500 million Islamic, Arab, and Persians, and they're all in relative degrees hostile to it. That's just a fact, whether you agree with it or
But
not.
why?
Because they hate Jews.
Because
Yeah.
Because Jew hatred in the Arab street is off the charts. Not even anti-Israel, just anti-Jew hatred.
it is a Western democracy, it is a free society. What do you
That's
mean by that?
nonsensical. Look,
Yeah, it is.
it's nonsensical that anybody would hate Israel just because it had democratic elections. The problem with
No, they hate us because we're Jewish.
Israel is it stole the land from the Palestinians. It left them in a state of permanent refugee status. It does
Who did that? The Arab. We had almost the same amount of refugees of Jews that left all the Arab countries and went to Israel. What did we do? We integrated them. What did you guys do? Put them in little camps and gave them second-class citizenship in Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt. So forget about it. You people have never treated that. That's the reason why they're permanent refugees.
nothing to fix it. And in fact, it's made the situation
And the UN.
worse by basically turning Gaza into a giant open-air concentration camp and then tearing the West
Unbelievable.
Bank up into little pieces and walling off
Let
the
me ask you,
Palestinians.
if on October 7th, if terrorists had come into your country and slaughtered, raped, beheaded, tortured 1,200 people, and then they had taken 240 hostages back, and then they had subverted UN and American and other European relief and built a $1 billion subterranean complex whose exits and entries were in schools, mosques, and hospitals, and hid as human shields. And then they said, when Israel said, we would like you to extradite the people who were responsible for this, they said no. And when you had pictures of people cheering in the streets and trying to hit the hostages, and we know now that the hostages were tortured, what would you do in response to that?
I mean, the Palestinians face the same exact question on a regular basis because Israel
On a regular basis, yeah, Israel's running into villages and beheading people and stealing and kidnapping people. Just random Israelis. They're just running into villages of Arabs and kidnapping people and holding them hostage.
does very similar
happens all
things
the
to the
time.
Palestinians and has since 1948. The reality is that Israel is the attacker and the aggressor in this scenario. And so this idea that somehow there are Western
So before Israel was even created, why were the Jews of Hebron ethnically cleansed in 1929?
democracy is, yeah, I guess in the same way that the United States genocided the Native Americans.
No, I don't know. This is getting ridiculous, Piers. I mean, you have to be rational. I mean, what does that have to genocide of the Native Americans? I mean, we're talking about the Middle East in rational terms, but when you bring in all of these other things, you just weaken your case. Israel, I was on the Stanford campus. Every day I walked across the campus, I saw very affluent Middle Easterners for the first time in their lives, many from where you are now, protesting, screaming, yelling at the government. If they did that in any of these Gulf states, they'd be arrested. And you know
It's
that.
true. There's no
You said,
protest in the UAE. I'm not
no,
going to tell you
if you
otherwise.
said right now, if
Yeah,
you want to say right
absolutely.
now, if you said right now, I've had a change of heart about October 7th. I just want to throw it out there. I think it was a horrible act, and I can see
It
why
was a
Israel
horrible
retaliates. If you just said, I have a change of attitude and I reassess my position, I can see why Israel did it. It's kind of an ambiguous question. There's arguments, and you would probably lose your position. You know
I don't
that.
think so.
I
No.
think you would. Try
So,
it.
for the record,
Try
I
it.
think that what the Palestinians did on October 7 was a horrible act. It was murder. It
Try
was
it.
slaughter.
Try it.
Who's going to condone that? But what Israel did in response was orders of magnitude worse.
It was in response to what they did, and it was a military action. Yeah, wars are devastating. That's why you don't start one.
Well, I'm just telling you that if you're talking from a country that if anybody wanted to express free speech or exercise religious liberty and choice, as they do in Israel, and I've been
But
to
they
Israel
don't
many
have
times.
this.
They did.
Yes,
I've been
they
to
do.
the Arab countries and
So
the Arab
Elon Pape
population.
can
Well,
go to
all I can,
Israel and hang out
unfortunately,
But my
with a
point is, you
professor.
think.
We don't have to allow people into the country we don't want here.
all right, gentlemen,
It's
I
very-
just want to
it's-
say we've run out of time, unfortunately. All I would say is I've actually broadcast my show uncensored from all over the Middle East in the last 2 years and talked about all these issues and expressed very strong opinions, and no one has tried to censor me
Nobody's
or suppress
censored
me
me.
You're not
or
a,
anything.
you're not a citizen. If you were a citizen of those countries, you couldn't do that. You know that. You're a famous guest, and so they accommodate you and your free speech. But if you were a citizen, have you ever had a citizen of the UAE and Saudi, when you were critical of that government, come on your show and attack that government while they were residing in that country? If you did, I'd like to learn about it.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. I don't think they would tolerate open dissent about the government and the way you're articulating. That's probably fair. We've got to leave it there, gentlemen. A very interesting debate. Thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, thanks guys for crashing out here. This was, I think, interesting. It wasn't his normal Piers Morgan screaming matches. I still respect both of them. The problem I have with Casagranda, whatever his name is, this guy, is that he's extremely biased against Israel, like unbelievably. Like there's no, objectivity at all. Like how can you even call yourself an historian? Anyways, if you agree with me or not, please comment, and I'll always respond as much as possible. And if you like this kind of content, you want to see more of it, please like and subscribe and comment, of course. And that really helps the channel. And thanks for crashing out with me, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.